The media, you want to know why so many tens of millions of Americans have nothing but contempt for you? Because we're seeing our fellow Americans having to flee about 1/4 of the United States geographically. Millions. Because their lives, their property, their livelihoods are threatened by Mother Nature. And MSNBC and CNN and the Democrats are already blaming Trump. We all know that natural disasters like this are horrific. We all know that government at all levels cannot possibly protect everybody. We also all know that is the responsibility of first responders in all of our communities and states, local firefighters, local emergency personnel, local law enforcement, and so forth, to be on the spot. It is impossible for the federal government to be everywhere with the kind of personnel and resources that are necessary to address these natural disasters. We're not even 100% certain at this hour exactly where it's going to hit. And then you have these political ambulance chasers and these media ambulance chasers who are already positioning themselves to attack the president. Look at this situation in Puerto Rico. We all saw it. We all were alive when it took place last year, the hurricanes. It got 2 hurricanes. It's an island. Local government is corrupt. The state government is incompetent. The public electric utility system, incompetent, disastrous, long before there were hurricanes. FEMA poured enormous resources into Puerto Rico. Over 3,000 people died. So you have that equation. True natural disasters on an island, accessible only by ships and aircraft. Terrible government leaders, so-called. And Trump is to blame. And Trump is to blame. $10 million was moved out of FEMA to give additional assistance to ICE by the administration. You've heard this all day. Well, the Department of Homeland Security just said that had nothing to do with disaster relief. It was a different part of the budget. So by the time the facts catch up with the hysteria that is promoted by the provocateur media and the Democrats, they say the same thing, do they not? It's almost too late. It's almost too late. I'll give you a prime example. The FEMA administrator, his name is Brock Long, and apparently this guy is enormously competent. And he's on with Andrea Mitchell today. Now, these FEMA folks are on TV, not because they're politicians, but because they're trying to warn people about what's coming as best as they can assess it. As best as they can assess it. And you know what's interesting to me? We talk about the role of the federal government. The federal government definitely has a role in this. It's not a first responder role, but it has a significant role. Not in redistributing wealth, but in protecting the American people as best as they can. But the first responsibility is at the local level. The responsibility is at the state level. That's where the resources are. That's where the people are. That's where the agencies are. That's why you don't have a federal police force with federal cops on the beat. There is no such thing. That's why you don't have federal firefighters. Well, there are some for federal lands and so forth, but you don't have the federal firehouse in your community. The vast majority of you, and there's a reason for that. When you call 911, federal ambulances don't show up at your door. It would be incredible. It may be absolutely impossible to have this kind of federal presence in every single community. And we don't even want it. We don't even want it. So we have a true natural disaster, which is going to be horrific for many people, and is already for many people. Some homes, maybe many, are going to be absolutely wiped off the face of the earth. Same with many businesses. Many communities are going to take a decade to recover. And in Washington, D.C., they talk politics. And in the media, with Washington-based reporters, the Washington-based reporters are talking politics. Now, there are some really true, excellent reporters who go out into these storms and report what's going on. I have nothing but admiration for those people. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about people like Andrea Mitchell. So listen to this, Hat Tip Daily Caller. This is Brock Long, the FEMA administration, on MSNBC today with Andrea Mitchell. Cut 4, go.
You know, when infrastructure is not working, it leads to more deaths. And there's a big discrepancy between direct deaths of how people died from the wind or the water or buildings collapse versus the long-term secondary or indirect deaths that occurred over a 6-month period. And a lot of that can be tied to a very weak infrastructure that we work around the clock in Puerto Rico to fix. And the governor knows that, and many of the municipalities understand that too. And if you want a true story, go talk to some of the 1,800 Puerto Ricans that we've hired to be part of this team to build a new future for Puerto Rico.
Well, we've had teams down there nonstop, Gabe Gutierrez and a lot of others, but the fact is, just as after Katrina, where there was terrible infrastructure in parts of New Orleans, that is a federal responsibility. These are American citizens.
No, you're actually wrong on that. It's not a federal responsibility to upkeep the infrastructure. Actually, most of the infrastructure in this company is owned by the private sector. FEMA doesn't control the
By the way, he meant in the country. Most of the infrastructure in this company is owned by the private sector, not FEMA. Go ahead.
And if you remember, when I went back for the third supplemental after Congress, I had to ask for special authorities. It's never been done before to fix the deferred maintenance or the infrastructure that was allowed to rot.
But the emergency rescue is the federal responsibility, is the point I'm trying to make.
She won't even let him finish because she's not trying to make a point. She's arguing with him. She's arguing with him. FEMA is not in control of the local sewer systems. FEMA is not in control of the various infrastructures in most communities. It's the Federal Emergency Management Administration. It's supposed to manage, coordinate federal aid to localities and states that are hit by natural disasters and so forth. They're not the first responders. And yet, Andrea Mitchell is intentionally pushing out ignorance. Said if there's any blame, it's on Trump. 1 week of the McCain memorial service about Trump. Everything's about Trump. Jeff Merkley is a senator from Oregon. So when the president said, look, we did everything we could in Puerto Rico, it was outstanding what we did, he means from a federal response perspective. Here's what took place with Andrea Mitchell and the senator. Go ahead.
Do you think that it's FEMA's, his point, Brock Long's point is that it's not FEMA's job, that they have decaying infrastructure. Do you think Puerto Rico is being treated differently because even though they're American citizens, they're viewed as an island offshore that people don't have to worry?
Okay, so this is not really a question. This is a lecture with a question mark behind it. And this, more and more, is what reporters do in Washington, D.C. Go ahead.
Is there a double standard, clearly?
It's absolutely clear. I came back realizing that a major reason that so much was being done so slowly is that Puerto Rico does not have a voting voice in Congress, not in the House, not in the Senate, and maybe there should be an individual. Maybe we need to revise and make sure that all of the American cities that are in the additional.
This is really loathsome. Because the American people, and that includes, obviously, the people in Puerto Rico, they are American citizens. The American people rally. The Red Cross rallies, all the charitable groups rally. The National Guard rallies, police forces rally, every kind of organization that is trained, professionals rally all over the country to help different parts of our country, which includes Puerto Rico, just as we rally to help other countries, people outside our country. We even send people to war to protect other people outside our country. And look at this. Look at how they've twisted the history of what took place in Puerto Rico in order to make a point, in order to condemn the President of the United States. Absolutely disgraceful. I'll be right back. David, Spring Hill, Florida, on the Mark Levin app. How are you, sir?
Doing great. I'm doing great, Mark. First of all, a very good year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm calling about the comments people are making about FEMA and who's responsible for what.
Yeah.
There happens to be a law, okay, called the Stafford Act of 1974. It's been in effect in many, many years, and it governs emergency management and public and private responsibilities in emergencies. And it is very clear that the Stafford Act spells out who is responsible for what. The Stafford Act, in conjunction with the Constitution, says the federal government cannot come in and take over your county, state, municipal, any other public entity at all. Everything there, pretty much everything that goes on, is responsibility of that lowest political subdivision. And that's in the law called the Stafford Act, okay?
Now, why is that the law? And by the way, Stafford was a liberal Republican senator, served for a long time from Vermont. Tell me, why is that the law? Why would Congress make that the law?
Well, here's the concept, and it's a difficult one for many people to grasp in this day and age. But the lowest level of responsibility for emergency preparedness for yourself, your family, and your community rests with the individual, with the individual person. That's why FEMA always says, people say, well, have 3 days worth of food. But emergency managers say, well, we can't get to you in 3 days. There's no guarantee. Have at least a week's worth of food, okay? So the person, the individual, the family is responsible for their particular safety.
But let's talk about levels of government, the Stafford Act. Why would the federal government say, and basically underscore the fact that, the local government, then the state government, these are the first responders. Now, why would they say that as a matter of law?
If the person can't help themselves, who do they call? They call 911. They want the fire department to come out, okay? Fire department can help them as much as they can. If the fire department can't help them, they go back to the next municipality, which in many cases is a county or a parish in some states, okay? And they go there for help. If the county or parish doesn't have the resources, and it's all based on the resources to help, then they can go to the state government. They call the state government Division of Emergency Management.
And you were an emergency manager. I just want to be clear with everybody.
Yes,
the federal government doesn't own those fire trucks. The federal government doesn't own those cruisers. The federal government doesn't own those ambulances or other transport vehicles. The federal government is not there. They try to forward place and plan resources and so forth, but it is simply impossible for the federal government to be the first responder in the vast majority of these cases.
And that's why it goes to the individual, then to the county, then to the state. If the state needs help, they call, and most states are in an area compact with 4, 5, 6, 7 states that touch each other geographically and can help each other, just like you were talking about the electric companies. When the electric companies go out and help each other during situations that one can't handle, it's neighbor helping neighbor. So states help each other. If the states can't handle the emergency, whether it be flooding or food or tornadoes or whatever it might be, they call FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and they do what they can, but they are not McDonald's, and they are not Burger King, and they are not Walmart. So they can't provide gasoline and water, and they're not charged to do that. Basically, it's out of the goodness of the hearts of the administrators and the Congress who allow FEMA to go in and provide food, clothing, shelter, along with voluntary organizations who are active in disasters, VOAD. Salvation Army, Red Cross, many, many, many others. Okay.
All right, my friend. Very, very helpful. I appreciate it, David. And you might want to get a dog, by the way. But thank you for your call. It is very important to understand. First responder. Look what happened on 9/11. I mean, the federal government has FBI here and there, and the U.S. Marshals here and there, and ICE here and there, and so forth and so on. But we have local police forces, local emergency personnel, local firefighting departments, and on and on and on. And that should be the first responsibility of all these local governments. But a lot of these local governments do the same thing as the federal government. Quite frankly, they piss away the tax dollars. They're involved in all kinds of things they shouldn't be involved in, and they don't really put the money where it belongs. With the firefighters, the cops, the emergency personnel, the infrastructure, and so forth and so on. But that said, again, there's only so much any government can do, let alone the federal government. You know, people ask me about, I talk about this Patriot supply all the time, and I'm not doing this to hawk it in any way. But here, in my own household, in another house that I have, we make sure we have what we think we need. It doesn't mean we will. I mean, some disasters are so massive it may just not matter. But we have them. Because I don't expect FEMA to just fly in here an hour, 2 or 3 when there's 150-mile-an-hour winds and to be able to do anything. Or if there's an earthquake or something of that sort. You've got to try and fend for yourself, number one. And then number two, it is the local first responders who have the responsibility. And they have that responsibility not because of some theoretical reason, because as a matter of fact, they're there. Or they can get there faster than anybody else. So when you have these national reporters and national politicians going on and on, I don't think Trump's ready, FEMA, they know that these massive natural disasters are going to cause enormous damage, enormous dislocation, electricity cut off for days, food supplies cut off for days, water systems poisoned with sewage and so forth. And so they know it. And so what they want to do is attack prior to the election. This is why you hate politicians. This is why you hate the media. And for damn good reason. Even when it comes to this Hurricane Florence, they're playing politics. They're positioning themselves. It's disgusting. I'll be right back.